Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people who I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment, and today I'm glad to have with me from Harem Scarem, Harry Hess. Welcome to the show, Harry.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. So, Harry, you've been in the business for a long, long time. In fact, there is a new re-release 30 years later that is just out now, Mood Swings, and we'll get into that in detail. But as I mentioned, you've been in the business for a long time, so something had to inspire you to get into music. When did you get interested and when did you start playing in the first place?
I guess, probably when I was around 13 years old, I started to take it a little bit more seriously. I was taking lessons as a kid, guitar lessons, drum lessons, and just kind of wanted to try to play everything. And then started, playing with neighborhood friends, school friends in bands, started to write songs. And then luckily enough, we got a record deal when I was 15 years old. And by the time I was turning 16, we'd finished that record in a band called Blind Vengeance. And then a couple years later, that ended and I started Harem Scarem, just more of a songwriting project for myself and hooking up with great musicians in the neighborhood to record my song ideas. And then it led to what it is today. And many, many years later, close to 40 years later, that we're still doing this.
Now, the name Harem Scarem, that comes from a Bugs Bunny cartoon, but it's not. My first thought was I was thinking of the "Let the bells ring, let the birds sing, I'm here, I'm here." It's not that. It was from a 1930s Bugs Bunny cartoon. How did you even know about that cartoon?
Yeah, you know what? I think it was our manager that pointed it out. We were throwing around band names and ideas, and Pete, the guitar player, had that name. And then so we even kind of looked it up to see what it was. And there was an Elvis movie called Harem Scarem, was spelled differently. And we just thought it sounded like we looked at the time. So that was really it. And, we were silly kids, teenagers, and thought Bugs Bunny was hilarious at the time, like into Looney Tunes cartoons. And in retrospect, it's just so ridiculous that we named our band that. But once you have a name and you start putting out records, you got to roll with it. So here I am 40 years later, regretting that.
Well, I know at one point you regretted it so much that the band changed its name to Rubber, of all things.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah, that's right. Well, you know what? When the musical winds kind of started to shift in the early 90s, when Nevermind came out by Nirvana, it was like anybody that was doing what we were doing was dead in the water. Like fortunately for us, we had a really strong fan base in Asia, Japan specifically, and pockets of Europe. So it was a bizarre thing, but in Canada, nobody would play us on the radio. So we thought, let's change the band name. We looked completely different at that point. We sounded completely different. And our label, Warner Music Canada at the time, loved the idea and kind of liked what we were doing as well, oddly enough. So we put out a single on a record, the band was named Rubber. The song was called Sunshine, and I think it went top 20 or something like that in that vicinity at rock radio. And so we kind of had some luck with it. And then a lot of people started to figure out at radio that it was really us. And it was more of a challenge than anything. So really at the end of the day, the next record we put out, I think we did 2 Rubber records. And we never even changed the name in a lot of territories like Japan where we were doing well because it was counterproductive. But at the end of the day, we went back to the whole rock thing. Once that time had passed and we were kind of like, well, you know what, let's embrace who we are and what we do. And we just said, screw it. We're a straight up rock band. We're going to keep going with this moniker for better or for worse.
So you bounced right back, pardon the pun.
We did.
Oh, man. I find it interesting as I think about some of the artists that I've interacted with over the years. The Stampeders at one point had broken up. And I actually met Ronnie King, the bass player and co-front person with the Stampeders, back in the late 70s when he had his own version of the Stampeders with no other original members in the band on
right.
tour. And they recorded an album called Ballsy, and it didn't do very well. But then it wasn't that much longer, a few years later, that the three of them, I guess, just realized, we're it. We're the Stampeders. And they had the chemistry, and they're still going. Same thing with the Eagles. I mean, I think if you've got something that really works, it can be easy to feel like you're pigeonholed or, the same old grind. But sometimes the magic is just that. It is the magic.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. No matter how many, projects you try to do or offshoots of whatever you had going on, at the end of the day, I mean, you've got a fan base built on whatever it is that they like about you. And so, yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You kind of, feel pigeonholed, but really at the end of the day, it's like you should be very grateful, and we are, that we have fans in a career and it's lasted this long. So you come full circle, right? When you're young and you just want to take over the world, and you look around and you think, wow, this band's doing great, that band's doing great, and you have dreams of, whatever achievements that you want to achieve. But really, when the dust settles, we're super lucky to be doing music for a living, and very grateful at this point. So it's a bit of a maturity thing. You have to live through many years in different incarnations of whatever it is that you're trying to achieve, and then to come out the other end and go, it's pretty incredible what's happened to us. We sold over 1 million records. It took a long time to do it, but I mean, those are metrics that most people or musicians, bands, artists never get to achieve. So it's not lost on us. We are grateful.
And absolutely, we're all grateful that Harem Scarem is still around after all these years, and 1 million albums doesn't come easy. Now, going back, way back now in the time machine, if we will, you did start out playing at a young age. Who were some of your most impactful influences?
Yeah, when I was about, 13, 14 years old, I was heavily influenced by whatever was on the radio at the time. And oddly enough, it was rock and metal. So you would hear, Bon Jovi, Slippery When Wet, Whitesnake, Def Leppard, Hysteria record was huge at the time, Quiet Riot, bands of that ilk. And I was personally also into, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, a little bit heavier stuff. But when I started writing, I was more into melodic bands, and I loved big productions. So Queen was a major influence. And like I said, Mutt Lange records like Def Leppard, that really was the path that I started to go down with regards to production and songwriting style.
Cool. Those are some awesome influences for sure. And we share those. There's nothing like, I heard somebody on a podcast the other day talking about Steve Perry, how there's a thing that can happen if you hear something a certain amount of times, it just kind of wears off on you. And he said it would be really easy with somebody like Steve Perry because his voice is so melodic that it can get lost in the music. Editor's note, the phenomenon that I was talking about here is called semantic satiation. Go ahead and look it up. Now back to the show. And it's easy to tell from Harem Scarem's music that you had some melodic rockers as influences. So the band was formed by you and Pete Lesperance. How did you guys meet?
Well, I met Pete in a local music store. Actually, he was working at a place called Alto Music in Oshawa, and I grew up around that area in the Ajax Whitby area. So, of course, you'd be going to music stores, checking out guitars, instruments, whatever, and we just happened to meet. And I told him I was doing some recording. I'd heard he was a great guitar player, so I actually had him come in and play guitar on a bunch of songs, just as writing sessions. And then we hit it off, and we started working together, not only, in the band, but then we started writing together, which was a big pinnacle moment of kind of the Harem Scarem sound coming together.
Cool. So you and Pete obviously hit it off, and all these years later, there's been over 1 million records sold, and there's 15 albums for Harem Scarem. Wow, what a journey that must have been. And I'll bet you there were some awesome stories from the road.
Well, yeah, I mean, we spent so much time writing and recording that I would say, compared to most bands that have been around as long as we have, that the majority of our time together was writing and recording versus touring. Like, we played hundreds, if not thousands of shows, but I think compared to a lot of other bands of that era, we didn't do as much touring, because We did well in Canada in the beginning, and we toured, I think, well, pretty much endlessly on the first two records. But then after that, because of the whole, musical climate change in the early 90s, we started to do really well in Europe and Asia, like I mentioned. And so to get over there and tour, it was a much bigger deal, right? It wasn't like hopping in a van and playing in London, Ontario, or Oshawa, Whitby, or whatever. This was like getting on a plane, having a crew, gear, all this stuff. So they were more calculated events when we would book a tour to go to Europe or Asia. But we were doing that since I guess 1993 was the first time we went overseas on the Mood Swings record.
And we'll be right back after this.
And we started to tour. Our first date in Europe ever was in Portugal. And then we've probably done, 18 to 20 dates as far as like just countries that we do when we go to Europe. And same thing with Japan. We've been to Japan 25 times, I want to say, something like that, something ridiculous. So, you know what? It became more of an international thing for us with touring. And so it was more spotty. It wasn't nonstop like it would have been had we had more of a career here in Canada or even North America in general. So that was kind of our plight.
That's interesting. The typical story is the overnight sensation spent 15 years touring between North Bay, Ontario to Thunder Bay to Winnipeg to Attawapiskat, whatever. But most artists that I talked to really cut their teeth on the road in Canada and had a much harder time breaking through overseas or in the US. So that's interesting how that happened for you guys, really.
Well, and again, in retrospect, if you look at it from a timing perspective, you can kind of go, okay, so I was doing that when I was 15 and probably closer to when I was 24. So almost 10 years of doing exactly what you described, either in Blind Vengeance or in Harem Scarem. But by the time our second and third record came out, I was, 24 years old. So I put in that road time from 15 to 24 in that sense, like the nonstop crazy thing in Canada. But like I said, we just started doing better in other territories. And it's just way more laborious to put together these foreign tours than it is, playing locally. So that's what it was. But we definitely put in the time. And to be honest, it was just way easier. Like, we loved going to Europe and Asia. I mean, we did well. We got paid better. And in Canada, we'd be in a van traveling to North Bay. And not that there's anything wrong with it, but like, we did that for years and years. So it felt way more luxurious to be on a plane than it was in a van.
Yeah, no kidding. And I grew up in North Bay, Ontario. Actually, I kind of cut my teeth as a guitar player, jamming with artists that would pass through town, like Thunder Mug, Max Webster, Triumph, and so on, would play at a bar in North Bay where I would go out to the matinee and jam with them. But as a musician, I couldn't wait to get out of North Bay.
Well, of course, yeah. That's always the goal, is to do well internationally and tour the world and go to different countries, different cultures, and that's kind of the goal, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you mention overseas stuff, for some reason, I do really well for streaming in China.
Wow.
Yeah, which is crazy. I mean, streaming doesn't pay a whole lot, as you know, but somebody said to me at one point, well, why don't you tour China? And I said, well, why don't you pay for it? Because it ain't so easy to do those European tours and overseas stuff on your own. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, I know. And that's why, that's what led me to that by your question, with regards to touring. So if you are going to put together a tour, it has to make sense. I mean, you just can't be sitting idle in a hotel in Europe or Asia for like a week or something like that. So the possibilities of putting together a string of dates that all line up while you're out there, it's really difficult to do. But, hey, we've done it forever. and we go out for, 3-4 weeks at a time and hit all the countries that we want to hit, and then we come back. And so it's good. I mean, I really like it that way. It's not boring. It's exciting when we go out and play. It's not something that we do, month in, month out. So it keeps it fresh and new.
Right. Now, speaking of fresh and new, not exactly new, but tell us about the re-release.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing. While we were talking and working with this company called Sing Market, and you can check out our new release on singmarket.com, I should mention that, the idea came up to start putting out some projects through this platform. And doing some digging, I thought, it's a 30-year anniversary of Mood Swings. And so Mood Swings was a record for us that broke us internationally. So on our first record, we came out in Canada, obviously, and I think we came out in Spain and Portugal. But when Mood Swings came out, it was a big hit for us internationally. And we had over 50 countries release that record. And what I mean by that, we were signed to Warner, and it was up to Warner whether they were going to release our record in specific territories. So Mood Swings for us was our big breakthrough record. And so in June will be the 30-year anniversary of that release. And so we thought, well, we want to do something for that. So we've decided to do a deluxe remaster package that includes vinyl. And this was never released on vinyl. So that's super cool for us. And a remastered CD, but on the CD, we've included 5 bonus tracks. They're acoustic bonus tracks of songs that are on Mood Swings. And so bundled together in a package that we're kind of using as our anniversary to celebrate the record.
Right. That's a pretty cool package. Now, I understand this is a combination, a multimedia thing. So it's digital and vinyl and or CD. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So when you go to Sing Market, you can actually get the digital version of everything that you're buying. So we have a poster, we have stickers, we have, obviously the vinyl, the CD, the bonus tracks. So when you go on there and you hit buy now, you get all those things. So you get MP3 versions of the audio, everything that you get physically, you get a mirror image of digitally. So that's something new and really cool and innovative technology. And it's also minted on the blockchain and is an NFT. So people that are buying it, they may not know it, but you're buying your first music NFT, which is another cool little technological component to all of this. And so, yeah, we're selling the physical and the digital, putting them together as one contained unit, and that's going out to the world, that anybody that buys it gets both.
Wow, I never thought I'd say this, but the future is now.
Yeah, I know. And you know what? It's really cool because I don't really know of a lot of people doing this. Some bands, I know Muse did this, they've been releasing NFTs, like just putting out singles and saying, hey, we'll mint this as an NFT. And later on, you can share that, you can sell it, you can do whatever you want with it. And it's kind of cool. But we're the first people to put together the physical and the digital together. And that bundle is minted as an NFT. So down the road, theoretically, you could sell your vinyl and your CD as a package, and the ownership actually gets transferred on the blockchain. So that might not mean anything to anyone today, but later on down the road, when this whole Web3 thing kicks in and you're buying and selling everything on the internet, and we know it's going that way, you're going to want proper ownership for anything that you buy with any value. So this is a really cool step forward in proper ownership with regards to the bands originally having ownership, and then when you sell it to the fans that are buying it, they have now proper ownership. Because, if you have a piece of vinyl and you go sell it, there's really nothing on paper that says it's yours. So this is a way to kind of solidify the ownership component digitally.
Very cool. It's not really common for legacy artists to embrace change. So kudos for that. I mean, that's a rarity in the business.
Yeah, I mean, like anything, we could just keep doing the same thing over and over again, just sell a piece of vinyl, and that's all cool, and everybody loves that. But really, the whole forward-thinking component of this, the whole digital aspect and the way things are moving, just in the world in general, we saw that during COVID, like everybody kind of figured out no matter how old you were, how to buy something on Amazon and have it delivered to your door the next day, right? And I would say pre-COVID, that it was pretty dicey for a lot of older people, right? There's grandmothers now that can just buy something on their phone on Amazon and have it delivered. So I think it really sped up the process and the whole, movement of buying and selling things on the internet. And of course, the world being digital now and music being contained digitally and sold and bought and consumed digitally, it was really important for us to kind of say, yeah, we can continue to do the legacy model of physical, but let's be smart and put it together with something new and innovative and offer somebody something, a new form of ownership and a way to consume it. So we're excited about it. And we get that, people will be like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. It doesn't mean anything to me. And that's fine. But it's like trying to explain to somebody 30 years ago how you're going to have this phone and you'll be able to send somebody money over your phone. It just made no sense, right? But this is kind of like that, but with music ownership.
Very interesting. That's a pretty cool analogy, the idea of trying to describe today's smartphones to somebody 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. I remember friends with bank cards going, oh, well, I'm not going to use tap. That just sounds like voodoo, right? We grew up in an era where people weren't walking around with credit cards and debit cards and just tapping on something. And then all of a sudden you walk out the store with it, So obviously there's a whole new generation of people coming up that are just used to everything being at their fingertips, everything being in their phone, and why not music and why not ownership of music that way? So that's kind of the premise behind it all and the mindset.
Yeah, but all these years later, I'm still waiting for my flying car, to be honest.
I know, the Jetsons, remember? Didn't we just come up to that year that, what was it, 2020 or 2021 or something? Yeah, yeah, I know, yeah.
And I still don't have a robot that does my dishes either.
Yeah, but we can't even drive on the road without smashing into each other. If we try that in the air, I think it's all over.
No kidding. Yeah, no kidding. Wow. Yeah, so this is pretty exciting, with the new re-release and the fact that it is multimedia. And again, the website?
singmarket.com.
Cool. And I know that I'm going to be looking forward to getting mine. That's for sure. Now, when I called you, you answered me from your studio. Is there something new in the works for you or Harem Scarem?
Well, you know what? Most of my days are spent mastering. I've been mastering audio for about, 14, 15 years now. That's kind of my main gig, as well as being in Harem Scarem. So, yeah, I've built a mastering studio in my house, and it's where I spend 90% of my day in this little tiny room in a basement. But it's lovely. I have lots of great equipment, love doing that job, and it's all good. I've got no complaints, let's say.
No kidding. That is a dream job for sure. Yeah, well, Harry, this has been great fun for me, and I don't want to take up your whole day. I know you've got more mastering and studio stuff to do. But listen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with me. And until next time, cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Now, that was fun. I don't very often get to talk about the Jetsons and flying cars on this podcast. But hey, what can I say? Now, be sure to go to singmarket.com and pick up your own special 30th anniversary re-release of Harem Scarem Mood Swings. And I'll make it easy for you. I'll put the link in the show notes. Now, you will have to go to singmarket.com to get the newly remastered 30th anniversary multimedia re-release of Mood Swings. Meanwhile, here is the original from that album, Harem Scarem and Stranger Than Love. Enjoy. Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn. All rights reserved. And hey, if you like the show, why not help us out? Buy me a coffee, subscribe, hit the like button, and until next time, cheers.